Hey, what is up everyone? Today we got a pretty unique story. It's narrated by Frederick Surrey. Get cozy and watch till the end, guys.
There are things in this galaxy that should never fall into the wrong hands. Ancient weapons locked away in vaults beneath the surface of long-dead worlds. Forbidden texts chained to altars in the deepest crypts of the Inquisition. Gene seed, that most sacred biological inheritance, guarded with a ferocity that borders on madness by every chapter that has ever borne the Emperor's mark. But among all the relics and treasures and terrible instruments of war that humanity has scattered across the stars, few are as precious, as irreplaceable, or as deeply personal as a dreadnought. And few fates are as horrifying to imagine as what might happen if one were to fall into the hands of the Orks. Now, before you settle in and let me walk you through this dark little thought experiment, I want you to understand something. This is not a story about simple looting. The Orks loot things all the time. They steal tanks and strap bigger guns to them. They rip the wings off downed fighters and bolt them to whatever passes for an aircraft in their ramshackle fleets. They take rhinos and chimeras and Lehman Russ battle tanks and transform them into sputtering, smoke-belching monstrosities that somehow still manage to roll across the battlefield and kill things. That is Tuesday for an Ork mech boy. That is just how business gets done in green-skin society. But a dreadnought is not a tank. A dreadnought is not a piece of equipment, not in the way the Imperium understands equipment. A dreadnought is a coffin, a walking tomb, a prison of ceramite and adamantium that houses the shattered remains of a space marine hero who was too broken to live and too valuable to die. Somewhere deep inside that armored shell, suspended in amniotic fluid and wired into the machine through a neural interface called a mind impulse unit, a warrior who might be centuries or even millennia old dreams fitful dreams between battles. When his chapter needs him, he is awakened. When the fighting is done, he is returned to the deep halls of the fortress monastery, his systems cycling down to standby, his consciousness fading into that terrible half-death that is neither sleep nor waking. So when we talk about the Orks capturing a dreadnought, we are not simply talking about greenskins getting their hands on a particularly impressive piece of military hardware. We are talking about an ancient hero of humanity falling into the clutches of creatures who view technology the way a child views building blocks. Who see sacred relics as raw materials, and who regard the concept of reverence as something that happens to other people. We are talking about what happens when the most profane engineers in the galaxy get hold of the most sacred warrior machine the Imperium has ever created. This is a scenario that keeps tech marines awake during their rest cycles. It is a nightmare that chaplains whisper about in the quiet moments between prayers. It is one of the most devastating losses a Space Marine chapter can suffer, because it is not just a loss of materiel or personnel. It is a loss of heritage, a loss of memory, a loss of something so deeply woven into the identity of the chapter that its absence leaves a wound that may never fully close. Every chapter knows this. Every chapter trains for this. And every chapter prays that it never happens to them. But the galaxy is vast, and war is indiscriminate, and the green-skin hordes are beyond counting. Sooner or later, somewhere, somehow, the unthinkable happens. And when it does, the consequences ripple outward like shock waves from a detonation, touching everything they reach and changing it forever. And it is a story worth telling. So close your eyes for a moment, breathe. Let the sounds of the world around you fade away, and let me take you to a place where the air tastes of smoke and iron, where the ground shakes beneath the tread of something massive and terrible, and where the worst fears of the Adeptus Astartes are about to come true. Let us begin with the prize itself. Let us talk about what exactly the Orks have gotten their grubby green hands on. So, the Walking Tomb, understanding what a Dreadnought really is. To truly grasp the horror of what we are about to discuss, you need to understand what a Dreadnought is. Not just the broad strokes, not just the summary you might get from a tactical briefing or a passing mention in a historical text. You need to understand it the way a space marine understands it. You need to feel the weight of what this machine represents. A Dreadnought is, at its most basic, a large bipedal combat walker. It stands several times taller than a man, armored in layers of ceramite and adamantium, so thick that most conventional weapons will bounce off its hull like rain off a mountain. Its limbs are not limbs in the way you or I understand the word. They are weapon platforms. What one arm might end in a massive power fist capable of crushing a battle tank's hull like an empty drink container. The other might mount an assault cannon, a weapon that spits high-caliber shells at a rate that can reduce an entire squad of enemy soldiers to their component elements in the span of a few heartbeats. Or it might carry a Lescanon, a weapon that fires concentrated beams of energy hot enough to bore through the thickest armor plating. Or a multi-melta, a missile launcher, a plasma cannon. The variations are numerous, and each one is devastating. But the weapon systems are not what make a Dreadnought special. Any sufficiently advanced civilization can build a walking weapons platform. The Tau have their battle suits. The Eldar have their Wraith Lords. Even the Orks themselves have their Killikans and Deaf Dreads. They're crude but effective. Walking machines that stomp and shoot their way across battlefields with characteristic green skin enthusiasm. What makes a Dreadnought unique, what makes it sacred, is what lives inside it. At the heart of every Dreadnought is a sarcophagus. Not a sarcophagus in the decorative sense, not an ornamental container for the honored dead. This is a life support chamber, a cybernetic coffin packed with medical technology that would make most civilian hospitals weep with envy. Inside this sarcophagus, submerged in life-sustaining amniotic fluid, lies the pilot. And the word pilot does not begin to do justice to what this individual is. The pilot of a Dreadnought is a space marine. Not just any space marine, but one of the chapter's greatest heroes, a warrior whose deeds were deemed so extraordinary, whose tactical knowledge and combat experience were considered so valuable that when his body was broken beyond the ability of even the apothecaries to repair, the chapter's leadership made the decision to preserve him. They took what was left of his shattered form, sometimes nothing more than a torso and a brain, and they sealed it inside the sarcophagus. They connected his nervous system to the Dreadnought's mechanical frame through a mind impulse unit, a neural interface that allows the Marine's consciousness to control the walker as if it were his own body. His eyes were replaced with optical sensors. His ears became audio pickups. His sense of touch became pressure readings on armor plating. Everything that once made him a flesh and blood warrior was stripped away, and replaced with the cold, precise feedback of a machine. This is considered the highest honor a space marine can receive. To be interred in a dreadnought is to be told that your service is too valuable to end, that your wisdom is too precious to lose, that your fighting spirit burns too bright to be extinguished by something as trivial as the destruction of your physical body. Chapters treat their dreadnoughts with a reverence that borders on worship. Tech Marines tend to them with sacred oils and whispered prayers. Chaplains perform rituals of awakening and return with the gravity of religious ceremonies. When a dreadnought walks onto the battlefield, the Marines around him fight harder, stand taller, push further. He is a living link to their chapter's history, a walking embodiment of everything they aspire to be. Some of these warriors have been interred for centuries. A few have served for millennia. Bjorn, the fell-handed of the Space Wolves, is over 10,000 years old, a warrior who fought alongside his Primarch Leman Russ during the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. He remembers things that no living being in the Imperium can recall from first-hand experience. He is a treasure beyond any monetary value, a repository of knowledge and memory that spans the entire history of the Imperium of man. And this is what the Orks have captured. Not a tank, not a weapon system, not a piece of hardware that can be replaced by the next shipment from a forge world. They have captured a hero, a living relic, a warrior whose consciousness stretches back through the centuries, whose neural pathways are fused with technology that the Imperium itself can barely maintain, let alone reproduce. And they have captured something that is simultaneously a weapon of tremendous destructive power and a life support system for one of humanity's greatest champions. The Dreadnought chassis itself is irreplaceable in many cases. The knowledge required to build them has, in large part, been lost over the millennia. Each chapter guards its dreadnought hulls with the same ferocity. It guards its gene seed, because if a hull is lost, it may never be replaced. The Castraferum pattern, the most common dreadnought design, has been in service for over 10,000 years. The Contemptor pattern is even older, dating back to the Great Crusade era, and surviving examples are treated as relics of incalculable value. The Leviathan, the Deredeo, the newer Redemptor pattern designed for Primaris Marines, so each represents a branch of technological knowledge that the Imperium struggles to maintain in the face of slow, inexorable decay. So when we talk about the Orks capturing a dreadnought, understand that we are talking about a loss that goes beyond the tactical. We are talking about a spiritual wound to the chapter that loses it. We are talking about the desecration of something holy. And we are talking about the Orks gaining access to technology they have absolutely no business possessing. Now, let us talk about the creatures who have gotten their hands on this prize. Let us talk about the Orks and their absolutely remarkable, completely insane, and somehow effective approach to technology. The biggest loot, the Ork way of war, and the culture of salvage. The Orks are, by almost any measure, the most successful species in the Warhammer 40,000 galaxy. They are the most numerous. They are among the most widespread. They are functionally immortal as a species, reproducing through spores that can survive almost any environment and grow into new Orks given enough time and organic matter. They have been fighting since before the Imperium existed, since before the Eldar fell, since before the Necrons went to sleep beneath their tomb worlds. They were engineered for war by the Old Ones themselves during the ancient conflict known as the War in Heaven, designed to be the ultimate survivor species, capable of thriving in conditions that would exterminate any other form of life. And they are absolutely, gloriously, magnificently terrible at everything they do. And it does not matter one single bit, because they are so numerous, so resilient, and so psychically potent that their incompetence becomes a kind of terrifying competence through sheer force of belief and numbers. This is the key to understanding Ork technology, and it is the key to understanding what would happen to a captured Dreadnought. The Orks do not understand technology in the way that the Imperium understands it, or the way the Tau understand it, or the way the Eldar understand it. They do not study engineering principles. They do not write technical manuals. They do not maintain blueprints or schematics or quality control procedures. What they have instead is something far stranger and, in its own way, far more powerful. They have instinct, they have genetic memory, and they have the Gestalt psychic field. Every Ork is to some degree psychic, not in the flashy, reality-bending way that an Eldar farseer or a Space Marine librarian is psychic. The Orks do not throw bolts of lightning, or see the future, or commune with the dead. What they do is generate a collective psychic field, a kind of background hum of belief and willpower that permeates everything they do. This field grows stronger the more Orks are gathered together, and it has a very specific and very important effect on the world around them. It makes things work. This is not metaphor. This is not poetry. This is literal. The Ork's psychic field, which the greenskins call the Great War Cry energy, has a measurable effect on physical reality. When enough Orks believe that a piece of technology will function, the psychic field provides that little extra push that makes it actually function, even if by all known laws of physics and engineering. And it absolutely should not. A gun that is nothing more than a tube with a spring-loaded mechanism and some loose bolts for ammunition will fire like a proper weapon in the hands of an Ork, because the Ork believes it will fire, and the psychic field makes that belief real. A vehicle that is held together by rust and willpower will roar to life and charge across the battlefield, because the Ork behind the wheel believes it will run, and the field obliges. This is why Ork vehicles painted red go faster. Not because red paint has any aerodynamic properties, but because Orks universally believe that red things are faster, and their collective psychic field nudges reality just enough to make it true. Yellow makes bigger explosions. Blue is lucky. These are not superstitions in the way that human superstitions are superstitions. So these are psychically reinforced beliefs that have actual, measurable effects on the physical world. Now, within Ork society, there exists a caste of specialists called Odd Boys. These are Orks who have been genetically predisposed by their Old Ones engineered DNA to excel at specific tasks. The most important of these, for our purposes, are the Mech Boys and the Pain Boys. Mech Boys are the Ork equivalent of engineers, and the word equivalent is doing a tremendous amount of heavy lifting in that sentence. A Mech Boy does not learn engineering. He does not study it. He is born with an instinctive understanding of mechanical principles that is encoded directly into his DNA. He looks at a pile of scrap metal and he sees a weapon. He looks at a wrecked vehicle, and he sees raw materials for something bigger, louder, and more destructive. And he does not need blueprints because the blueprints are in his blood. He does not need tools because he will make tools out of whatever is lying around. And if nothing is lying around, he will use his fists. The best mech boys, the ones who rise to the rank of big mech, possess a level of technological intuition that frankly surpasses anything the Imperium can produce. This sounds like heresy, and the Adeptus Mechanicus would certainly insist that it is heresy, but the evidence is hard to ignore. Big mechs build devices that should not work. They construct force field generators out of scrap metal and wishful thinking. They create teleportation devices, energy weapons, and gravity manipulation tools using components that a tech priest would not deign to use as doorstops. And these devices work, not always reliably, and often with spectacular and hilarious side effects, but they work. Pain boys, on the other hand, are the orc equivalent of doctors, and if you thought the word equivalent was working hard in the previous paragraph, it is practically having a breakdown here. A pain boy is a surgeon in the same way that a chainsaw is a surgical instrument. Technically capable of performing the required function, but with a level of collateral damage that would make any sane medical professional weep. Pain boys perform surgery without anesthesia, using instruments they call stabby bits, and their idea of a successful operation is one where the patient survives long enough to walk out of the operating tent, even if they walked in with a broken arm and walked out with a mechanical leg and someone else's head. But here is the thing. Some pain boys are remarkably good at what they do, within the extremely broad parameters of orc medicine. They can reattach severed limbs. They can perform head transplants. They can install crude but functional cybernetic replacements for damaged body parts, devices they call bionics, which are built by mech boys and installed by pain boys, in a collaboration that is equal parts terrifying and impressive. Orcs are tough enough to survive procedures that would kill most other species several times over, and the combination of orc resilience and pain boy enthusiasm means that the greenskins have, in their own crude way, mastered the art of cybernetic augmentation. This is important. Remember this, because when we talk about the orcs capturing a dreadnought, we are talking about a piece of technology that is, at its core, a cybernetic life support system fused with a weapons platform. And the orcs have specialists in both of those fields. Crude specialists, yes. Insane specialists, absolutely. But specialists nonetheless. And then there are the Death Skulls. Every orc clan has its own personality, its own culture, its own way of approaching the endless war that defines green-skin existence. The Goths are the biggest and meanest, preferring to solve problems with their fists. The Evil Sons are obsessed with speed, painting everything red and bolting rockets to anything that moves. The Bad Moons are the wealthiest, their teeth growing faster than any other clans, which in an economy based on dental currency makes them the equivalent of born billionaires. But the Death Skulls are the looters, the scavengers, the thieves. They are the orcs who see battle as a two-stage process. First, you kill everything. Then you take everything that was not destroyed in the killing. They paint themselves blue because they believe blue is lucky. And they are superstitious even by orc standards, festooning themselves with bone amulets and lucky charms stolen from the bodies of their enemies. The Death Skulls would be the Ork clan most likely to capture a Dreadnought, because for a Death Skull, capturing a Dreadnought would be the equivalent of winning the lottery. It would be the single greatest piece of loot any Ork could possibly imagine getting his hands on. The prestige alone would be worth more teeth than most war bosses see in a lifetime. So now we have the stage set. We have the prize, a walking tomb containing one of humanity's greatest warriors, yea, armored in materials the Orks cannot reproduce, powered by technology they do not understand, and housing a consciousness that has been fighting for longer than most Ork civilizations have existed. And we have the Thieves, a species of genetically engineered war machines with an instinctive understanding of technology, a psychic field that can make broken things work, and absolutely no respect for the sanctity of anything that is not nailed down, and sometimes not even then. Let us talk about how the capture happens. The fall, how a Dreadnought might be captured. The first thing you need to understand is that a Dreadnought does not get captured easily. These are some of the toughest war machines the Imperium fields. Their armor can shrug off weapons that would gut a battle tank. Say their weapons can scythe through infantry formations like a harvester through wheat. They are piloted by warriors with centuries of combat experience. Individuals who have fought and survived battles that would fill entire libraries of tactical textbooks. Capturing a Dreadnought is not like capturing a vehicle that has been abandoned by its crew. The crew cannot abandon a Dreadnought. The crew is the Dreadnought. Dreadnought. The pilot cannot eject, cannot surrender, cannot be separated from his machine by anything short of cutting open the sarcophagus itself. But the galaxy is a big place, and war is a messy business, and sometimes things go wrong in ways that no amount of planning or preparation can prevent. Imagine a world. It does not matter which world. There are 1,000,000 worlds in the Imperium, and on any given day, and 1,000 of them are under attack by something. This particular world is being overrun by an Ork invasion, a green tide that has swept in from the fringes of the system like a storm surge crashing against a seawall. The local Imperial Guard garrison has been overwhelmed. The planetary defense forces have been scattered. The civilian population is either fleeing to whatever shelters they can find or being rounded up by gleeful green-skin raiders who see them as entertainment, labor, or both. A Space Marine strike force has been deployed to the surface. Their mission is straightforward: blunt the Ork advance long enough for reinforcements to arrive, evacuate key strategic assets, and if possible, eliminate the war boss leading the invasion to destabilize the Greenskin command structure. Among the assets deployed is a venerable Dreadnought, an ancient warrior who has served his chapter for over 500 years. His name is inscribed on a scroll affixed to his sarcophagus, a name that has been spoken with reverence in the chapter's halls for generations. His tactical database contains detailed records of hundreds of campaigns. His weapons are maintained with religious devotion by tech marines, who consider his care to be a sacred duty. The battle goes well at first. The Dreadnought advances through the streets of a burning city, his assault cannon tearing through Ork mobs with the mechanical precision of a veteran warrior who has done this 1,000 times before. The Orks fall before him in droves, their crude weapons bouncing harmlessly off his adamantium-reinforced hull. He is, in that moment, everything a Dreadnought is supposed to be, an angel of destruction, yea, a walking monument to the Emperor's wrath. But the Orks are not just savage, they are numerous, they are relentless, and they are led by a war boss who, despite his crude appearance and guttural speech, possesses a level of tactical cunning that would surprise anyone who underestimates the green skin capacity for warfare. The war boss has seen dreadnoughts before. He knows what they can do, and more importantly, he knows what they are worth. The trap is simple because orc traps are always simple. Complexity is anathema to the green skin mind. The war boss sends wave after wave of boys into the dreadnought's line of fire, not expecting them to survive, not caring if they do. They are bait, fodder. Their purpose is to fix the dreadnought in place, to force him to stand and fight while the real attack develops. And while the ancient warrior is occupied with the endless green tide pouring through the streets, the war boss sends his tank boostas around the flanks with their crude but devastatingly effective rocket launchers. He sends commandos through the sewers beneath the city with melta charges and demolition squigs. He sends a mob of burnaboys up through a collapsed building to attack from above with their crude but scorchingly hot flame weapons. The dreadnought fights with the fury of the ages. His power fist crushes skulls and shatters vehicles. His assault cannon speaks its thunderous song, each shell finding its mark with the precision of a warrior who has been killing enemies of the Emperor since before most of the orcs on this planet were born. But there are too many. There are always too many. Well, that is the fundamental truth of fighting orcs. They come in numbers that defy rational military planning, and they do not stop coming until there are no more orcs left to come, which is effectively never. A rocket catches the dreadnought in the joint between his torso and his left leg, a lucky shot that exploits one of the few weak points in his design. The explosion does not destroy the leg, but it damages the actuators, the mechanical muscles that allow the limb to move. The dreadnought stumbles, catches himself, keeps fighting. Another rocket hits his right shoulder, mangling the mounting for his assault cannon. The weapon jams, its barrels twisted by the impact. The dreadnought switches to his power fist, wading into the orc horde with his one remaining weapon, crushing everything within reach. But he is slowing down. Yet the damage to his leg is worsening. Hydraulic fluid is leaking from ruptured lines, pooling on the ground beneath him like the blood of a wounded giant. His power systems are fluctuating, the damage from multiple impacts accumulating, faster than his internal repair. Systems can compensate, and the orcs keep coming. Always the orcs keep coming. The killing blow is not dramatic. It is not a heroic last stand or a climactic duel with the enemy warlord. It is a melta charge, planted by a commando who crawled through a drainage pipe to reach the dreadnought's rear armor, where the ceramite is slightly thinner to accommodate the heat exhaust vents. The explosion burns through the armor plating and severs several critical power conduits. The dreadnought's systems crash. His weapons go dark. His legs lock in place. The actuators freezing as power is lost to his mobility systems. But the sarcophagus holds. The life support systems, drawing power from a separate, heavily shielded power cell, continue to function. The pilot is alive. Unconscious, perhaps, his neural link disrupted by the catastrophic systems failure, but alive. His twin hearts still beat, slow and steady, sustained by the amniotic fluid and the medical technology that has kept him alive for 500 years. The Space Marines fighting alongside the Dreadnought try to reach him, They know what is at stake. The loss of a dreadnought hull is a catastrophe. The loss of the warrior inside is a tragedy that the chapter may never recover from. They fight with desperate fury, bolters barking, chainswords howling, throwing themselves at the orc horde with the single-minded determination that defines the Adeptus Astartes. But the war boss has planned for this too. He throws his biggest boys, his nobs, his mega nobs, in their crude but effective mega armor, into the gap between the Space Marines and their fallen ancient. The fighting is savage, brutal, up close, and personal, in the way that only combat between Space Marines and Orc nobs can be. And while the Marines are locked in that desperate struggle, the war boss sends his mech boys forward with chains and hauling rigs and a truck modified with a crane mechanism that was clearly built for exactly this purpose. The mech boys work fast. They are not gentle. They wrap chains around the dreadnought's limbs with the enthusiasm of children wrapping a birthday present. Yet if the children were 7-foot-tall green monsters with a genetic predisposition toward mechanical engineering, they hook the chains to the crane on the truck. The engine roars, belching black smoke into the air, and the dreadnought is dragged, scraped, hauled across the rubble-strewn street like a prize fish being landed on the deck of a boat. The Space Marines see what is happening. They redouble their efforts, throwing themselves forward with a fury born of desperation and horror. But it is too late. The Orks have their prize. The truck rumbles away, the dreadnought bouncing and scraping behind it, surrounded by a mob of cheering, hollering greenskins who have absolutely no idea what they have captured, only that it is big, it is impressive, and it belongs to them now. Somewhere deep inside the sarcophagus, Yin the pilot drifts in and out of consciousness. He can feel dimly through the damaged neural link that he is being moved. He can hear, through the audio pickups that are still functioning, the guttural roar of orc voices raised in celebration. He cannot move. He cannot fight. He can only wait and hope and pray to the Emperor that his brothers will find him before the green skins figure out what they have. The sounds of the battlefield are fading behind him now, replaced by new sounds that are equally terrible in their implications. The grinding of the truck's transmission, the squeal of chains under tension, the cheerful bickering of orcs arguing over who gets to sit closest to the prize. And underneath it all, the steady, relentless rumble of the truck's engine, he carrying him further and further from his battle brothers with every passing second. The pilot tries to activate his distress beacon, a miniaturized transmitter built into the sarcophagus that is designed to broadcast his location to any Imperial forces within range. But the beacon's antenna was damaged during the capture, its signal too weak to penetrate the interference generated by the Orc camp's crude but powerful force field generators. The signal bleats into the void, unheard, unanswered, a mechanical prayer that finds no congregation. He tries his Vox system next, hoping to send a coded message on the chapter's encrypted frequency. But the Vox array is built into the Dreadnought's external hull, and the damage to his systems means he cannot access it. He is cut off, isolated, but a consciousness trapped in a box that is being carried away from everything he knows by creatures that view him as nothing more than particularly interesting salvage. The journey takes hours. The truck bumps and lurches over terrain that was never designed for wheeled vehicles, and the dreadnought scrapes and bangs behind it, the chains holding him in place, groaning with every jolt. At one point, The truck stops and the orcs get out to argue about which direction to go. The argument degenerates into a fist fight, as orc arguments invariably do, and is only resolved when the biggest orc hits the others hard enough to establish his opinion as the correct one. Then the journey continues, the truck lurching forward again, the Dreadnought bouncing in its wake. They will not find him in time. The mech shop. What happens when the orcs crack open their prize? The Dreadnought is brought to the orc camp, and to call it a camp is to dignify it considerably. It is a sprawling, chaotic mess of scrap metal and canvas, of smoking fires and piles of salvaged equipment, of fighting pits and squig pens, and the crude workshops where the mech boys ply their trade. The air smells of burning oil and unwashed orc and the acrid tang of poorly refined fuel. The ground is littered with the detritus of 100 looting expeditions, broken weapons, shattered armor plates, the stripped hulls of vehicles that have been cannibalized for parts. The Dreadnought is deposited in the middle of the largest workshop, and a structure that was probably once an Imperial manufactorum, but has since been converted to orc purposes through the simple expedient of tearing out everything that looked complicated and replacing it with things that looked properly orky. The floor is stained with oil and blood in roughly equal proportions. The walls are festooned with tools of every description, most of them improvised, all of them terrifying. And standing over the Dreadnought, his beady red eyes glittering with an excitement that borders on religious ecstasy, is the Big Mech. The Big Mech is the most powerful mech boy in the war boss's retinue. He has earned his position through a combination of genuine mechanical genius, brute strength, and the unshakable confidence of a creature who has never once doubted his own abilities, and regardless of how many of his previous inventions have exploded. He is taller than most orcs, broader across the shoulders, with arms that are thick with muscle and decorated with crude tattoos, depicting various mechanical schematics that may or may not bear any relation to actual engineering principles. His hands are enormous, calloused, stained with grease, and capable of surprisingly delicate work when the mood strikes him. He circles the Dreadnought like a predator circling wounded prey. He runs his hands over the ceramite armor, feeling the texture, gauging the thickness, noting the points where the metal has been damaged, and the points where it remains intact. He peers at the weapon mountings, the joint assemblies, the exhaust vents, the sensor arrays. He does not understand what he is looking at, but not in the way a tech priest would understand it. He understands it the way a musician understands a melody, the way a painter understands color. He understands it in his bones, in his blood, in the genetic memory that the Old Ones encoded into his species millions of years ago. And what he understands is that this is the single most impressive piece of technology he has ever seen. This is not a Lehman Russ, a machine whose secrets can be puzzled out in an afternoon. This is not a chimera, a vehicle so straightforward that even a particularly clever grot could figure out how to make it run. This is something else entirely. This is sophisticated. This is complex. This is, in the orc vernacular, dead propa-flash. The Big Mech calls for his tools. Not his everyday tools, the hammers and wrenches and cutting torches that he uses for routine work. His special tools, the ones he keeps locked in a chest made from the hull plate of a wrecked Predator tank, secured with a lock that is both mechanical and psychological in nature, since any orc foolish enough to try to steal from a Big Mech can expect to wake up the next morning missing several limbs and possibly his head. These tools are finer, more precise, clearly inspired by instruments the mech has seen used by Imperial Tech Marines or Adeptus Mechanicus personnel during previous campaigns. They are still crude by Imperial standards, but by Ork standards, they are masterworks of precision engineering. The first step is assessment. The big mech needs to figure out what he is dealing with. He starts with the external armor, examining the plates, testing them with a cutting torch to gauge their hardness, trying to pry panels loose to see what is underneath. The ceramite resists his efforts with a stubbornness that delights him. This is strong material. This is material worth having. He makes mental notes about how it is layered, how the plates overlap, where the bolts and rivets secure them in place. Then he moves to the weapon systems. The assault cannon is damaged, its barrels twisted by the rocket impact that disabled it. The big mech examines the mechanism with the careful attention of a connoisseur evaluating a fine wine. If the wine were a rotary gun capable of firing hundreds of shells per minute, he traces the ammunition feed, the firing mechanism, the motor that drives the barrel rotation. Some of it he understands instinctively. Some of it puzzles him. The power fist on the other arm is simpler, at least conceptually, a massive hydraulic grip surrounded by a disruption field generator. The mech has seen power fists before, on the occasional Terminator his boys have managed to bring down. But this one is bigger, better, more. And then he gets to the sarcophagus. This is the moment where everything changes. Because when the big mech finally cracks the outer armor panels that protect the core of the Dreadnought, when he peels back the layers of ceramite and adamantium and finds the sealed coffin at the center of the machine, he discovers something that he did not expect. There is something alive in there. The big mech can hear it. Through the metal, through the seals, through the layers of insulation and shielding, he can hear the faint, rhythmic pulse of a heartbeat amplified by the life support systems. He can hear the hum of machinery keeping that heartbeat going. He can feel, through the vibrations in the metal, the warmth generated by a living body suspended in fluid. This is not a machine. This is a creature inside a machine. And for the big mech, this changes everything. Because the big mech has seen deaf dreads. He has helped build deaf dreads. He knows what it means to take a living being and wire it into a walking weapon. He has watched pain boys crack open an Ork's skull and shove neural probes into the brain stem, connecting nerve to wire, flesh to metal, consciousness to machine. He has seen the process from start to finish, and he has seen the results. He knows that the thing living inside this Imperial machine is the pilot, the brain, the controlling intelligence, and he has a choice to make. Da pur git insituitas hadi si so mardsai. The fate of the Space Marine pilot. This is the part of the story where things become truly grim. And in a universe defined by the phrase, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war," that is saying something. The Space Marine inside the sarcophagus is alive. His life support systems are functioning on backup power, maintaining the careful balance of fluids and nutrients, and electrical stimulation that keeps his shattered body alive. His neural link to the Dreadnought's systems is severed, or at least severely disrupted, which means he is conscious but disconnected. He can think, he can feel, but he cannot act. He is a mind without a body, a consciousness trapped in a box, aware that something is terribly wrong, but unable to do anything about it. Yea, he can hear things. The audio pickups in the sarcophagus are still functional, and through them he can hear the sounds of the orc camp, the guttural shouting, the clang of metal on metal, the roar of engines, the distant crack of gunfire, and closer, much closer, the sound of tools working on the hull of his home, his prison, his body. Someone is taking him apart. Someone is peeling away the layers of his armored shell with the casual efficiency of a butcher breaking down a carcass. The horror of this situation is difficult to overstate. Imagine being paralyzed, blind, and trapped in a sealed container while you listen to someone dismantling the container around you. Imagine knowing that the individuals doing the dismantling are not friends, not allies, not members of your species. They are orcs. They are the enemy. And they are not dismantling your container to rescue you. They are dismantling it because they want to see what is inside. Because they want to use what is inside. Because to them, you are not a hero, not a warrior, not a human being. You are a component, a part. A particularly interesting bit of salvage that happened to be still warm when they found it. The Space Marine, being a Space Marine, does not succumb to despair. His conditioning, his training, his centuries of experience, all of these things combine to keep his mind focused and his spirit unbroken. He begins to assess his situation with the cold, analytical precision that has kept him alive through hundreds of battles. He catalogs his resources, minimal. He evaluates his options, effectively none. He considers the possibility of rescue, unlikely in the immediate term, but not impossible. His chapter will know that his Dreadnought has been lost. They will come for him. The question is whether they will arrive before the orcs finish whatever they are planning. The big mech, meanwhile, is faced with a decision that would stump most orc leaders, but which, for him, is actually quite straightforward. He has a choice between three basic options. Option 1. He can kill the pilot and strip the Dreadnought for parts. This would be the simplest approach and would yield a substantial haul of advanced materials and components. The ceramite armor alone would be worth a fortune in orc teeth, and the weapon systems could be adapted for use on other orc vehicles or walkers. The sarcophagus itself contains technology that could be studied and potentially replicated in a crude fashion. This is the safe option, the practical option, the option that a sensible orc would choose. But the big mech is not a sensible orc. No big mech worth his title is sensible. Sensible is for grots. Option 2. He can try to keep the pilot alive and use him. This is the option that appeals to the big mech's professional pride. He has the Dreadnought. He has the pilot. Why not have both? Why not figure out how the pilot is connected to the machine and use that connection? Why not have a walking weapon platform controlled by a being who actually knows how to fight, rather than having to wire in some orc or grot who will just stomp around in circles until someone points them at the enemy? This option is appealing, but presents significant challenges. The neural interface that connects the pilot to the Dreadnought is incredibly sophisticated, far beyond anything the orcs have ever attempted. The Mind Impulse Unit is a product of technology that the Imperium itself barely understands, a relic of an age when humanity's mastery of science was at its peak. Replicating it, or even maintaining it, would require knowledge that no mech boy possesses. But there is a workaround. There is always a workaround when orcs are involved, because orcs do not accept the concept of something being impossible. Impossible is just another word for has not been hit hard enough yet. Option 3. Remove the pilot, wire in an orc, and use the Dreadnought hull as the basis for the biggest, meanest, most impressive Def Dread anyone has ever seen. This is the option that makes the most sense from an orc perspective. The hull is strong, the armor is thick, the weapon mountings are solid. Or rip out all the Imperial gubbins, replace them with good, honest orc technology, wire in a volunteer who is crazy enough to want to spend the rest of his life welded inside a metal box, and you have yourself a war machine that will make every war boss in the sector green with envy. Greener, anyway. Each of these options is horrifying for different reasons. But the most likely outcome, given what we know about orc behavior and orc psychology, is some combination of options 2 and 3. Let me explain why. The Pain Boy will want the pilot. Not because the Pain Boy cares about the pilot's well-being, and certainly not because the Pain Boy understands the pilot's value as a repository of tactical knowledge. The Pain Boy wants the pilot because the Pain Boy wants to look inside a space marine. Pain Boys are compulsive experimenters, driven by a genetically encoded curiosity that borders on obsession. The chance to examine a living space marine, to study the augmentations and modifications that make these warriors superhuman, to root around in their organs and glands and neural pathways. This is a Pain Boy's idea of paradise. Some particularly ambitious Pain Boys have even attempted to capture space marines for exactly this purpose, hoping to unlock the secrets of the gene seed and produce a strain of even hardier orcs. The Big Mech, on the other hand, wants the machine. He wants to understand how it works. He wants to figure out how the pilot is connected to the hull, how the weapons are powered, how the locomotion systems function, how the life support systems maintain the pilot's biological processes. He wants to take it apart, study it, and put it back together in a way that makes it bigger, louder, and more destructive. And between the two of them, the Pain Boy and the Big Mech, they will figure something out. It will not be pretty. It will not be elegant. It will be crude, brutal, and deeply, fundamentally wrong by the standards of any civilized species in the galaxy. But it will work, because orc technology always works, one way or another. Orcification, rebuilding the Emperor's finest as green skin glory. The process begins with the weapons. This is where the Big Mech feels most comfortable, and it is where the most dramatic changes will occur. The damaged assault cannon is removed first. It is too complex for the mech to repair, its internal mechanisms too finely tuned, its ammunition too specialized. But the mounting is solid, and the mounting is what matters. But in place of the assault cannon, the mech installs a big Shuta battery, 3 crude but effective heavy-caliber automatic weapons bolted together in a triangle configuration and fed by a single massive ammunition drum. The barrels are oversized, the firing mechanisms are over-engineered, and the whole assembly is painted red because more DACA deserves to go faster. The Power Fist presents a different challenge. The disruption field generator that makes the fist truly devastating is beyond the mech's ability to maintain, and without it, the fist is just a very large hydraulic grip. But the hydraulics are good, incredibly good by Ork standards, and the mech sees potential. He reinforces the fist with additional armor plating, welds spikes and blades to the knuckles in the time-honored Ork tradition of making everything pointier, and replaces the disruption field generator with a crude but effective power field generator of his own design. It is not as elegant as the original. It is not as precisely tuned, but it hits like a freight train, and it crackles with visible energy, which is aesthetically satisfying in a way that Orks find deeply appealing. Additional weapons are added because an Ork vehicle without enough weapons is like an Ork without enough teeth, which is to say, impoverished and sad. A rocket launcher is bolted to the top of the sarcophagus housing. A scorcha, a crude flamethrower weapon, is mounted on the hip joint. A grabbing claw, a hydraulic arm designed to seize enemies and crush them, is welded to the back of the torso. By the time the mech is finished, the Dreadnought bristles with weapons like a very aggressive mechanical hedgehog. The armor receives attention next. The ceramite plating is too valuable to remove, and the mech is smart enough to recognize quality when he sees it. Instead of replacing the armor, he adds to it. Additional plates of scrap metal are bolted, welded, and riveted over the existing hull, creating a layered defense that is simultaneously more and less effective than the original. More effective because there is simply more metal between the pilot and incoming fire. Less effective because the additional weight puts strain on the locomotion systems, and the crude welds create weak points that a skilled opponent could exploit. But in the Ork mind, more armor is always better, and the visual effect is undeniably impressive. Where once there was a sleek, purposeful war machine, marked with imperial heraldry and sacred purity seals, now there is a hunched, brutish thing covered in crude iron plates, festooned with Ork glyphs and kill markings. Its original livery buried beneath layers of blue paint because the big mech is a death skull, and blue is lucky. The locomotion systems are repaired using a combination of salvaged parts and Ork ingenuity. The damaged leg actuators are rebuilt with heavier, cruder components that sacrifice the Dreadnought's original agility for raw, stomping power. The other leg is similarly reinforced for symmetry, because even an Ork mech understands that a walker with one leg bigger than the other is going to fall over eventually. The hip joints are strengthened with additional hydraulic pistons, scavenged from a wrecked sentinel walker. The feet are enlarged with welded-on plates that double as weapons. Their undersides studded with spikes for maximum stomping potential. But the most important modification is the one that happens inside the sarcophagus. This is where the pain boy takes over, and this is where the horror truly begins. The pilot is still alive. The pain boy has been keeping him alive, not out of any sense of compassion, but because a living subject is more interesting than a dead one. The pain boy has been studying the sarcophagus, poking at the life support systems, prodding the neural interface connections, trying to figure out how the whole thing works. He has been doing this with the careful attention of a scientist and the bedside manner of a serial killer. What the pain boy discovers fascinates him. The neural link between the pilot and the machine is unlike anything he has seen before. But it is more sophisticated than the crude nerve-to-wire connections used in deaf dreads, more elegant than the brutal brainstem probes used in kilocons. It is a full neural integration, a complete merger of biological and mechanical systems that allows the pilot to control the Dreadnought with the same ease and precision with which a healthy person controls their own body. The Pain Boy cannot replicate this technology. No one alive in the galaxy, save perhaps the most gifted tech priests of Mars, could replicate this technology. But he does not need to replicate it. He needs to use it. And using it requires doing something that is simultaneously brilliant and abominable. He keeps the original pilot connected, not because he wants the pilot to control the Dreadnought. The pilot is Imperial, he is an enemy, yet he would use the Dreadnought against the Orks the moment he regained control. But the neural link is already established, already calibrated, already optimized for this specific pilot's nervous system. Ripping it out and trying to install a new pilot would require understanding the technology well enough to recalibrate it, which the Pain Boy cannot do. So instead, the Pain Boy does what Pain Boys do best. He improvises. He adds a second control system. Using crude neural probes and a lot of wire, and what can only be described as sheer belligerent confidence in his own abilities, the Pain Boy installs a secondary control interface alongside the original. This new interface is connected to a volunteer Ork pilot, one of the big mech's most loyal boys, who has volunteered for the honor of being wired into the biggest, a most impressive walking weapon anyone in the warband has ever seen. The Ork pilot's neural connections are crude but effective, piggybacking on the existing system, overriding the original pilot's commands with raw, overwhelming psychic presence. The original pilot, the Space Marine hero who has served his chapter for 500 years, becomes a component, a biological processor. His neural pathways, already optimized for controlling the Dreadnought's systems, serve as the foundation upon which the Ork pilot's crude commands are translated into precise mechanical actions. The Space Marine's consciousness is still there, still aware, still screaming inside his own mind, as his body is used as a relay station for an Ork's violent impulses. He can feel the Dreadnought moving, but it is not his movement. He can sense the weapons firing, but it is not his will that pulls the trigger. He is a passenger in his own tomb, a ghost in a machine that has been stolen from him by creatures that do not even understand what they have taken. This is, without question, one of the most terrible fates that can befall a Space Marine. Worse than death, worse than corruption by chaos, because at least chaos offers the illusion of choice, the possibility that the corruption can be fought, resisted, overcome. This offers nothing. This is pure mechanical helplessness. This is being used as a tool by beings who view you as nothing more than a particularly useful piece of salvage. The Ork psychic field plays its part as well. With an Ork pilot connected to the system, the Gestalt field begins to interface with the Dreadnought's technology in ways that should not be possible. Systems that were damaged during the capture begin to function again, not because they have been repaired, but because the Ork believes they should work, and the psychic field obligingly fills in the gaps. Power fluctuations stabilize, sensor systems recalibrate. The crude Ork modifications that should be incompatible with the Imperial technology somehow integrate. The psychic field smoothing over the rough edges and making connections that exist more in the realm of belief than in the realm of engineering. And then there are the cosmetic changes. Because Orks are not just engineers. They are artists, in their own terrible way, and no self-respecting mech boy would send a creation into battle without ensuring that it looks properly intimidating. The chapter heraldry is defaced, painted over with crude orc glyphs that proclaim ownership and challenge all comers. The aquila, the double-headed eagle that is the symbol of the Imperium, is torn from the hull and replaced with a massive orc face hammered out of scrap iron, its jaws open in a permanent snarl, its eyes made from the headlights of a wrecked Imperial truck. Trophies are hung from the hull, skulls mostly. Orc skulls, human skulls, even a few alien skulls that the Death Skulls picked up during previous campaigns. They dangle from chains welded to the armor plates, clicking and clacking with every step. A macabre wind chime that announces the Dreadnought's presence long before it comes into view. The exhaust system is modified to belch thicker, blacker smoke because orcs believe that a vehicle that produces a lot of smoke is a vehicle that is working hard. And a vehicle that is working hard is a vehicle that is powerful. Additional exhaust stacks are welded to the back of the torso, tall and crooked, billowing clouds of oily black smoke that trail behind the Dreadnought like a dark cape. The effect is purely aesthetic, and by aesthetic, I mean terrifying. The modified Dreadnought looks like something that crawled out of an industrial nightmare, a fusion of precision engineering and savage artistry that should not exist, and yet, somehow, does. The sound system is the final touch, because in the orc mind, a truly great war machine needs to announce itself with appropriate volume. A pair of speakers, salvaged from an Imperial Vox relay and amplified with orc technology until they can be heard from several kilometers away, are mounted on the shoulders. These speakers serve a dual purpose. First, they broadcast the orc pilot's war cries at a volume that can crack glass and loosen fillings, providing a psychological weapon that complements the physical ones. Second, they allow the big mech to play his favorite battle tunes during engagements, a selection of sounds that is less music and more organized noise, consisting primarily of rhythmic drumming, shouted challenges, and the recorded sound of things exploding. The result is an abomination, a hybrid, a dreadnought hull that is neither fully Imperial nor fully Orc, but something new and terrible, a walking weapon that combines the best qualities of both civilizations, the durability and sophistication of Imperial engineering with the raw, brutal effectiveness of Orc technology, all held together by a psychic field that allows the impossible to become merely improbable. It is a monument to greenskin ingenuity and a testament to the horror of what happens when sacred technology falls into profane hands. It is a walking insult to everything the Adeptus Astartes hold dear, and simultaneously the greatest achievement of the big mech's career. The Orcs have a name for it, of course. They always have names for their creations, names that are simultaneously descriptive and absurd in the way that only Orc naming conventions can be. They call it Da Big Un. Da Big Un walks, the looted dreadnought, in battle. The first deployment of Da Big Un is a disaster, for the enemy, that is. The target is an Imperial Guard defensive position on the outskirts of a hive city, a line of trenches and bunkers that has been holding the Orc advance at bay for weeks. The guardsmen behind those barricades are veterans, hardened by months of fighting against the green-skin tide, and they have repelled every assault the Orcs have thrown at them. They have anti-tank weapons. They have artillery support. They have discipline and training, and the unwavering conviction that the Emperor protects. They have held this line through 6 major assaults, each one blunting the Ork advance and sending the greenskins reeling back in disarray. The guardsmen are proud of their record. Their commanding officer has sent dispatches to Sector Command praising their fortitude. There are rumors of commendations, maybe even medals. They have never seen anything like Da Big Un. The morning of the 7th assault begins like all the others. The rumble of distant engines, the rising cloud of dust and smoke that heralds the Ork advance. The scouts report movement on the horizon, a dark mass of vehicles and infantry surging forward with the usual Ork enthusiasm. The guardsmen take their positions with practiced efficiency, checking their laser guns, loading their heavy weapons, murmuring prayers to the Emperor. The anti-tank teams sight their weapons down the main avenue of approach. The artillery spotters climb to their observation posts and prepare to call in fire missions. Everything is routine. Everything is normal. Everything is exactly as it has been 6 times before. And then Da Big Un steps out of the smoke. The looted Dreadnought comes stomping out of the smoke and dust of the Ork advance like something out of a nightmare. It is bigger than any deaf dread the guardsmen have encountered, broader, more heavily armored, moving with a fluidity and purpose that belies its crude, ramshackle appearance. So, where a normal deaf dread lurches and staggers, Da Big Un moves with a confidence that speaks of superior engineering. Where a Killa Khan jitters and hesitates, Da Big Un advances with the steady, implacable certainty of a machine that knows exactly what it is doing. The Imperial hydraulics beneath the Ork modifications give it a smoothness of motion that is deeply unsettling, like watching a familiar friend walk with a stranger's gait. The ceramite armor beneath its crude Ork plating absorbs las fire like a sponge absorbs water. The bolted-on weapons belch fire and lead in every direction, the big Shuta battery rattling with a sustained ferocity that keeps the defenders' heads down while the Ork infantry charges forward in its wake. The guardsmen try their anti-tank weapons, and a lascannon beam strikes Da Big Un square in the chest, and the ceramite armor, the original Imperial ceramite that the mech boy was smart enough not to remove, holds. A missile hits the shoulder, and the additional Ork armor plating absorbs the blast, the crude iron and scrap metal serving as sacrificial protection for the more valuable ceramite beneath. The guardsmen watch in disbelief as the walking nightmare continues its advance, seemingly unfazed by weapons that should have crippled any normal Ork walker. And then, Da Big Un reaches the trenches, and the real horror begins. The Power Fist, Ork modified but still powered by those magnificent Imperial hydraulics, punches through the sandbag wall of the first trench line like it is made of paper. Guardsmen scatter like mice before a cat, but the Dreadnought is fast. Faster than anything that size has a right to be, and the fist comes down again and again, each blow pulverizing earth and ferrocrete and anything unfortunate enough to be beneath it. The Scorcha mounted on the hip opens up, bathing the trench in liquid fire, and the screams of the burning guardsmen are drowned out by the thunderous rattle of the big Shutas. Inside the stolen hull, the Ork pilot is having the time of his life. He is stomping, he is shooting, he is burning things. He is living the dream of every Ork who has ever volunteered to be wired into a deaf dread, but better, because this is not some crude orc construction held together by rivets and hope. This is Imperial engineering. This is ceramite armor and adamantium joints and a power plant that hums with a smooth, reliable efficiency that no orc engine has ever achieved. Yet the orc pilot feels invincible, and in the grip of that feeling, the psychic field surges, and the Big Un becomes even more formidable, the belief of the pilot and the surrounding orc mob feeding into the machine's systems and pushing them beyond their design specifications. And deep inside the sarcophagus, behind the orc pilot's crude neural override, the original pilot watches through sensors he can no longer control. He watches as his body, his walking tomb, his sacred duty, and his eternal prison is used to slaughter the Emperor's servants. He watches as guardsmen, loyal citizens of the Imperium, are crushed and burned and torn apart by a machine that was built to protect them. He can feel the orc pilot's joy, a savage, uncomplicated delight in destruction that is transmitted through the shared neural link like static on a Vox channel. What he can feel the psychic field pressing against his consciousness, the weight of orc belief trying to reshape him, to make him part of the machine in a new and terrible way. He resists. He is a space marine. He has endured centuries of warfare, decades of half-death, an eternity of isolation and mechanical existence. He has faced orcs before. He has faced chaos before. He has faced things that would break lesser beings like twigs. He will not submit to this. He will not allow himself to be absorbed into the green madness of the orc psychic field. He is the Emperor's warrior, and he will remain the Emperor's warrior, even if the only battlefield left to him is the interior of his own stolen mind. But resistance costs energy, and energy is something that the life support systems of the sarcophagus can only provide in finite quantities. Yet the original pilot knows, with the cold certainty of a warrior who has made peace with death many times over, that he is slowly dying, not from the physical trauma of his capture, but from the mental and spiritual exhaustion of fighting for control of his own consciousness against the relentless pressure of the orc psychic field. Every moment he resists is a moment that drains him further. Every battle that Da Big Un fights is a battle that he loses, not on the physical plane, but on the battlefield of his own soul. The orcs, of course, notice none of this. To them, Da Big Un is simply the greatest looted vehicle anyone in the warband has ever produced. The big mech is showered with praise and teeth. The Pain Boy takes credit for the biological aspects of the modification and receives a steady stream of new patients eager to undergo similar procedures. The war boss uses Da Big Un as the centerpiece of his armies, deploying the looted Dreadnought at the head of every major assault, watching with satisfaction as the massive walking weapon smashes through defensive positions that would have stalled a conventional orc advance for days. Word spreads. Among the orc clans, news of Da Big Un travels like wildfire. Other war bosses hear about the looted Dreadnought and immediately begin planning their own capture attempts. Other big mechs study the reports, such as they are, and begin theorizing about how they might improve upon the design. The idea of looting dreadnoughts becomes fashionable among the green skin elite, a new status symbol to aspire to, like having the biggest stompa or the loudest sound system. And among the Space Marines, news of the capture spreads with a very different tone. Vengeance and Recovery. The Imperium strikes back. The chapter that lost the Dreadnought does not take the news well. They would not be Space Marines if they did. The loss of a Dreadnought is a wound that cuts deeper than any physical injury. It is a spiritual trauma, a violation of something sacred that touches every member of the chapter, from the freshest scout to the chapter master himself. The warrior inside that sarcophagus is their brother, their ancestor, their living link to battles fought centuries ago. And he is now in the hands of the enemy, being used against the very people he swore to protect. The chapter master calls a council of war. The chaplains lead the chapter in prayers of atonement, for the loss of a Dreadnought is seen not just as a tactical failure, but as a failure of duty, a sin that must be cleansed through blood and fire. The Tech Marines, those Marines who have trained with the Adeptus Mechanicus and who understand the technology of the Dreadnought better than anyone else in the chapter, are consulted about the potential consequences of the loss. Their assessment is grim. If the Orks are able to study the Dreadnought's systems, even in their crude, ham-fisted way, they may gain insights into Imperial technology that could make them even more dangerous in the future. The neural interface technology, in particular, is of concern. If the Orks can figure out how the mind impulse unit works, even in the most basic terms, and they could potentially improve the control systems of their deaf dreads and killikans, making those already dangerous machines even more effective. The armor materials and the power plant are similarly concerning, though the Orks' inability to reproduce Imperial manufacturing processes limits the immediate threat. But the technical concerns are secondary to the spiritual ones. The chapter's honor demands recovery, and recovery means war. A strike force is assembled with a speed and determination that speaks to the gravity of the situation. This is not a routine deployment. This is a crusade. Veterans are pulled from garrison duty on a dozen worlds. Terminators are roused from the armory, their ancient suits of tactical Dreadnought armor blessed and prepared for battle. The chapter's remaining Dreadnoughts are awakened. Their ancient pilots briefed on the situation and asked to join the rescue mission. Every one of them agrees immediately, because the bond between Dreadnought pilots transcends the centuries. They know, better than anyone, what their brother is enduring. The strike force descends on the Ork encampment like the wrath of the Emperor himself. Drop pods scream through the atmosphere, their retro thrusters firing in the final seconds before impact, slamming into the ground with impacts that send shock waves rippling through the Ork camp. Thunderhawk gunships roar overhead, their weapons tearing through the flimsy Ork structures with contemptuous ease. Land raiders rumble out of their deployment zones, their twin-linked las cannons burning through everything in their path. The Orks fight back, because Orks always fight back. Oh, it is not in their nature to flee, and a camp full of Orks that has recently been celebrating a great victory is a camp full of Orks that is spoiling for another fight. The war boss rallies his boys with a roar that shakes the ground, and the green tide surges forward to meet the blue armored angels of death. And at the center of the Ork line, the Big Un stands. The Space Marines see it. They know what it is, even beneath the crude Ork modifications, the bolted-on armor plates, the blue paint, the Ork glyphs. They can see the outline of the original Dreadnought hull beneath the green skin additions. They can see the sacred machine that was stolen from their chapter, defiled by alien hands, turned against the Emperor's servants. And the sight of it fills them with a fury that goes beyond anger, beyond rage, into a cold, a focused determination that is far more dangerous than any hot-blooded berserker charge. The chapter's own dreadnoughts advance toward Da Big Un. 2 of them, ancient warriors whose interred pilots have served for centuries, moving with a purpose that is simultaneously mechanical and deeply personal. They know that their brother is inside that abomination. They know that he is suffering, and they know that they must free him one way or another. The clash between Da Big Un and the loyalist dreadnoughts is a spectacle of destruction. The ground shakes with every step. Weapons fire illuminates the battlefield in strobing flashes of light. The Orc-modified Power Fist meets an Imperial Power Fist in a collision of energies that sends shockwaves rippling through the air. Da Big Un is tougher than any normal Def Dread, its Imperial hull absorbing punishment that would tear a lesser machine apart. But it is facing opponents who understand its technology intimately, who know where the weak points are, who can tell the difference between the original Imperial armor and the crude Orc additions bolted over it. One of the loyalist dreadnoughts seizes Da Big Un's weapon arm and twists, using the superior precision of its original Imperial servos to find the weld points where the Orc Big Shooter battery is attached to the original assault cannon mounting. The weld breaks. The Big Shooters fall away, clattering to the ground in a shower of sparks and loose ammunition. The other dreadnought attacks from behind, its assault cannon tearing through the crude Orc armor plating on the rear, stripping away the layers of scrap metal to expose the original ceramite beneath. Inside Da Big Un, the Orc pilot fights with the savage ferocity of his kind. He throws punches with the Power Fist, kicks with the reinforced legs, tries to bring the Scorcha and the rocket launcher to bear on his attackers. But the loyalist dreadnoughts are better. Their pilots have centuries more experience. Their systems are properly maintained. Their movements are coordinated with a precision that the crude Orc neural interface cannot match. And deep inside the sarcophagus, the original pilot makes his move. He has been waiting for this, conserving his strength, hoarding his dwindling energy, enduring the Orc pilot's override of his systems with a patience that only a warrior who has spent centuries in a metal coffin can muster. He has been feeling the battle through the neural link, sensing the vibrations of each impact, hearing the sounds of bolter fire and the roar of chain zords through the audio pickups. He knows his brothers are here. He knows they have come for him. And now, with the Orc pilot distracted by the desperate fight against 2 loyalist dreadnoughts, the original pilot pushes back. He pushes with everything he has left, every scrap of willpower, every ounce of determination, every fiber of the superhuman warrior spirit that was forged in him by centuries of training and augmentation and faith. He pushes against the crude Orc neural override, exploiting the momentary lapses in the alien pilot's concentration, sending conflicting signals through the neural link that caused Da Big Un to hesitate, to stumble, to miss a step. It is enough. Yet one of the loyalist dreadnoughts sees the opening and takes it, driving its Power Fist into the joint between Da Big Un's torso and its left leg, with a precision that speaks of an experienced warrior exploiting a known weakness. The joint crumples, the leg buckles. Da Big Un falls to one knee, and the second Dreadnought is on it immediately, pinning the weapon arm, while the first tears away the remaining Ork modifications, stripping the stolen hull down to its original Imperial core, with the careful, deliberate movements of a surgeon removing a tumor. The Ork pilot fights to the last. He screams and thrashes within his crude neural cocoon, sending wild, undirected commands through the system that caused a Big Un's remaining limbs to flail uselessly. But the original pilot is fighting back now, too, and the conflicting signals from both sources cause the Dreadnought's systems to lock up entirely. The Big Un goes still, motionless, silent. The Tech Marines move in. They disconnect the Ork pilot's crude neural interface with the careful precision of their training, severing the alien connections without damaging the original systems beneath. They remove the Ork modifications one by one, cataloging the damage, assessing what can be repaired and what must be replaced. They check the sarcophagus, running diagnostics on the life support systems, monitoring the original pilot's vital signs. He is alive. Barely. His neural pathways are damaged, scarred by the prolonged exposure to the Ork psychic field and the crude override of his control systems. His life support systems are functioning on reserves that are nearly depleted, but he is alive, and he is free. The chaplain approaches the recovered Dreadnought and places his hand on the battered hull. Through the Vox speakers, a voice emerges, weak, raspy, mechanical, but unmistakably human. I endured. The scars that remain, lasting consequences of the capture. The physical recovery of the Dreadnought takes months. The Tech Marines work with painstaking care, removing every last trace of Ork modification, repairing the damage to the original systems, replacing components that were damaged or destroyed during the capture and subsequent improvement. The ceramite armor is restored. The weapon systems are replaced. The actuators and hydraulics are rebuilt to original specifications, using replacement parts that are, in some cases, centuries old, so drawn from carefully maintained reserves that exist specifically for situations like this. But the damage to the pilot is harder to repair. The neural pathways that connect his consciousness to the Dreadnought's systems are scarred, degraded by the prolonged exposure to the Ork psychic field. His reaction times are slower. His control is less precise. There are moments, brief but terrifying, when his consciousness flickers and he finds himself unable to distinguish between his own commands and the echo of the Ork pilot's neural imprint, a ghostly afterimage that lingers in the shared circuitry like a stain that cannot be scrubbed clean. The chaplains work with the pilot's spiritual recovery, conducting rituals of purification that are part ceremony and part therapy. They help him process the trauma of his experience, the horror of being used as a tool by the enemy, the violation of his sacred duty. The pilot responds with the stoicism expected of a space marine, but those who know him well, those who have spoken with him across the centuries, can tell that something has changed. There is a weight in his voice that was not there before, a darkness in the depths of his consciousness that even the Emperor's light cannot fully dispel. The broader implications of the capture are studied by the chapter's leadership and, inevitably, by the Inquisition. The possibility that the Orks could learn to replicate, even in crude form, the neural interface technology used in Dreadnoughts is a threat that the Ordo Xenos takes very seriously. Inquisitorial agents are dispatched to monitor Ork activity in the surrounding sectors, say watching for signs that the greenskins have attempted to apply what they learned from Da Big Un to their own walker technology. The Ordo Xenos has seen this pattern before, in smaller scales and with less sophisticated technology. Orks who capture a particularly impressive piece of equipment do not just use it once and discard it. They study it in their own crude way, absorbing its principles into the genetic memory that informs all Ork engineering. A mech boy who has worked on a Lascanon will, in subsequent projects, produce weapons that are subtly more effective at piercing armor, even if the mech boy cannot articulate why. A pain boy who has examined space marine physiology will, without understanding the science behind it, begin to produce cybernetic modifications that interface more cleanly with Ork biology. The knowledge seeps in, but not through study or deliberate learning, but through a kind of osmosis that is facilitated by the Ork psychic field. This is what makes the capture of a Dreadnought so dangerous. Not the immediate tactical impact, though that is significant. Not the loss of the hull itself, though that is devastating to the chapter that lost it. The true danger is the long-term effect on Ork technology. Every piece of advanced technology the Orks capture is another drop in the ocean of their genetic understanding, another small step in the slow evolution of their species from crude brawlers to something that might, given enough time and enough captured technology, become a genuinely unstoppable force. The mech boys, it turns out, did learn things. Not the specific, detailed technical knowledge that the Inquisition fears, but something more insidious, inspiration. The big mech who modified Da Big Un has told every other mech boy who would listen about the incredible quality of the Imperial technology he worked with, about the smoothness of the hydraulics, the strength of the armor, the elegance of the neural interface. He has planted seeds of ambition in the minds of other mechs, seeds that will grow into future attempts to capture and loot dreadnoughts, attempts that may be better planned and more successful than the first. The Pain Boy, too, has gained knowledge. He has seen the inside of a space marine, has studied the augmentations and modifications that make them superhuman. He has not unlocked the secrets of the gene seed, the Imperium's most closely guarded biological treasure, but he has gained a better understanding of how space marine physiology works. This knowledge will inform his future experiments, making his cybernetic creations slightly more effective, his surgical procedures slightly more successful. And among the Ork clans, the legend of Da Big Un spreads. It becomes a story told around campfires and in fighting pits, a tale of the greatest loot ever captured and the magnificent walking weapon it became. It inspires other war bosses to target dreadnoughts specifically, to develop tactics for disabling and capturing these formidable war machines, rather than simply trying to destroy them. The capture of a dreadnought becomes a mark of prestige, a badge of honor that places a war boss above his rivals in the endless hierarchy of green-skin competition. For the Imperium, this means that dreadnoughts become targets in a way they were not before. Chapters begin to deploy additional security around their dreadnoughts, assigning bodyguard units specifically tasked with preventing a repeat of the capture. Tactical doctrines are revised to account for the possibility of Ork capture attempts. Tech Marines install fail-safe devices in the sarcophagi, kill switches that can be activated remotely to shut down the Dreadnought's systems, and, if necessary, end the pilot's life rather than allow him to fall into enemy hands. This last measure is the most controversial. It is, in essence, a sanctioned suicide mechanism, a way of granting the pilot the death that the Dreadnought was specifically designed to prevent. Some chapters embrace it as a necessary precaution. Others reject it as an abomination, arguing that the purpose of the Dreadnought is to preserve the pilot's service at any cost, and that installing a device designed to end that service defeats the entire purpose of the technology. The debate rages in chapter councils and inquisitorial chambers across the Imperium, and like most debates in the Imperium, it is never fully resolved. Echoes in the deep halls, the nightmare that never ends. In the deep halls of the fortress monastery, where the chapter's dreadnoughts sleep between deployments, the recovered pilot rests. His systems have been repaired, his armor restored, his weapons replaced. To external observation, he is the same ancient warrior he was before the capture, a venerable dreadnought of his chapter, a living relic of battles fought long ago. But inside the sarcophagus, what in the silent darkness where consciousness flickers between waking and the void, the pilot knows the truth. He is not the same. He will never be the same. The experience of being captured, modified, and used as a tool by the Orks has left marks that go deeper than the physical damage to his neural pathways. It has left marks on his soul, if a creature that is more machine than man can still be said to possess a soul. He dreams now. Not the empty void that used to fill his periods of dormancy, but actual dreams. And in those dreams, he hears things. The guttural roar of an orc voice raised in triumph, the clang of crude tools on sacred metal, the laughter of greenskins who do not understand what they have, who cannot comprehend the sacrilege they have committed, who see nothing but loot where the Imperium sees the divine. And sometimes, but in the deepest, darkest moments of his dormancy, he feels a presence in the neural link, a ghost, an echo, the faintest trace of the orc pilot who was wired into his systems, a fragment of alien consciousness that the tech marines could not fully purge, that lingers in the shared circuitry like a splinter buried too deep to extract. It does not speak. It does not communicate. It simply exists, a constant, low-level reminder of what was done to him and what might be done again. The other dreadnoughts in the deep halls sense his unease. They do not speak of it directly, because dreadnoughts do not speak of weakness or fear or pain. These are concepts that were supposed to have been left behind when they were interred, relics of a biological existence that no longer applies. But they sense it nonetheless. Well, in the subtle fluctuations of his power output, in the microsecond hesitations in his responses, in the quality of silence that surrounds his sarcophagus like a shroud. One of them, an ancient who has served for over 8 centuries, breaks the silence one night. His mechanical voice crackles through the Vox network that connects the deep halls, low and steady, and carrying the weight of centuries. "You survived," the ancient says. "That is what matters, not what was done to you, not what they took or what they changed. You survived, and you are still ours, and you will fight again when the chapter calls. That is the duty we accepted when we were interred. That is the burden we bear, and we bear it together." The words are simple. They are not eloquent or poetic or particularly profound, but they are enough, because in the deep halls, and among the walking tombs that house the chapter's greatest heroes, simplicity is its own kind of wisdom, and the knowledge that he is not alone, that his brothers stand beside him in the darkness, that the bond of duty and sacrifice that connects all dreadnoughts transcends even the horror of what was done to him. This knowledge is a light in the void. The pilot does not respond. He does not need to. In the silence between heartbeats, in the hum of life support systems and the whisper of recycled air, the understanding passes between them. It is a communication that transcends words, a shared recognition between beings who have both endured the terrible gift of immortality in iron. They know what it costs. They know what it takes. They know that the alternative, the true and final death that awaits them all eventually, what is not something to be feared, but something to be earned. And it is earned through service, through endurance, through the stubborn, defiant refusal to stop being who you are, no matter what the galaxy throws at you. And the pilot sleeps, and the dreams are a little less dark, and the echo of the Ork pilot's presence is a little less intrusive, and the weight of what was endured is a little less crushing. There will be other battles. There always are. There will be other horrors, other challenges, other moments where the weight of existence threatens to overwhelm even the most resolute spirit. But for now, in this moment, there is peace. Not the permanent peace of true death, not the warm embrace of oblivion, but the temporary, fragile peace of a warrior who has fought his battle and lived to fight another day. It is enough. Yet in the deep halls, among the walking tombs and the sleeping heroes and the ghosts of 10,000 years of war, it is enough. He will fight again. He has to. That is the nature of the Dreadnought's existence, the eternal bargain that is struck when a hero is sealed inside the sarcophagus. You fight, you sleep, you wake, you fight again. And the war goes on, forever and ever, until the galaxy itself burns out, or the Emperor rises from his throne, or death finally comes for you in a form that even the sarcophagus cannot deny. And in the deep halls, in the darkness and the silence and the slow passage of centuries, the recovered pilot holds on to the thing that the Orks could not take from him. Not his weapons, not his armor, not his tactical knowledge or his combat experience or his sacred duty, his identity, his humanity, his refusal to be reduced to a component, a tool, a bit of salvage. The Orks tried to make him part of their machine, and he endured. They tried to absorb him into their psychic field, and he resisted. They tried to erase everything that made him who he was, and he held on. The galaxy is full of stories like this, if you know where to look. Stories of warriors pushed to the very edge of what any being should be asked to endure, and then pushed further. Stories of sacrifice that would break your heart if you let them. Stories of duty carried out in conditions that defy description, by individuals who deserve more than the Imperium will ever give them. The Dreadnoughts, those walking tombs, those sacred machines, those prisons for the living dead, carry more stories within their ceramite shells than any library could hold. In every sarcophagus is a book. Every neural link is a sentence. Every awakening is a new chapter in a story that began centuries ago and may not end for centuries more. Think about that the next time you look at a dreadnought on the battlefield, in a piece of artwork, or on your tabletop. Think about the warrior inside. Think about what he has seen, what he has endured, what he has sacrificed. Think about the fact that somewhere in the deep halls of a fortress monastery, that warrior is sleeping right now, drifting in the void between consciousness and oblivion, waiting for the call that will bring him back to a galaxy that has moved on without him. And think about what it would mean for that warrior to wake up in a mech boy's workshop, surrounded by grinning green faces and the sound of crude tools on sacred metal. And that is the true horror of our story today. Not the violence, though there is plenty of that. Not the destruction, though there is that too. The true horror is the violation. The transformation of something sacred into something profane. The reduction of a hero to a component. The theft of identity, of purpose, of everything that separates a person from a machine. In the grim darkness of the far future, where there is only war and the laughter of thirsting gods and the endless, grinding attrition of a galaxy tearing itself apart, that kind of endurance is rarer than any weapon and more precious than any relic. It is the endurance of the human spirit, the stubborn, defiant refusal to be broken by forces that should, by all rights, have broken you 1,000 times over. The Orks will try again. They always do. They will capture other vehicles, loot other weapons, steal other technologies. They may even capture another Dreadnought someday, and the process will begin again. The modification, the desecration, the horrific fusion of green skin ingenuity and Imperial engineering. The galaxy is large enough, and the war is long enough, that almost any nightmare you can imagine will eventually come true somewhere, on some forgotten world, in some dark corner of the void. But the chapters will be ready. They will guard their dreadnoughts more carefully. They will fight more fiercely to recover their fallen. They will install whatever safeguards they can devise and pray to the Emperor that they are never needed. And in the deep halls, the dreadnoughts themselves will sleep and wait, and hold on to the things that make them more than just weapons in the Emperor's arsenal. Because in the end, that is what separates a dreadnought from a deaf dread, what separates a space marine from an orc, what separates the Imperium from the green tide. Not technology, not firepower, not armor or weapons or tactical doctrine, but the knowledge that every warrior, no matter how broken, no matter how changed, no matter how far removed from the flesh and blood being they once were, is still a person, still worthy of reverence and honor, and yes, rescue. Even if the rescue comes too late to prevent the scars, even if the scars never fully heal, even so, the war continues. It always does. And somewhere in the deep halls of a fortress monastery, you will never visit on a world whose name you will never know, a recovered dreadnought sleeps. And in his dreams, the echo of an orc's laughter slowly fades, replaced by something quieter and stronger, and infinitely more enduring. The sound of a chapter's hymns rising in the darkness like a prayer. And that is the story of what happens when the Orks capture a dreadnought. It is a story of sacrilege and ingenuity, of horror and resilience, of the terrible things that can happen when the galaxy's most irreverent species gets its hands on one of the Imperium's most sacred relics. It is a story that reminds us that in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the line between weapon and warrior, between machine and man, between tool and person, is thinner than we might like to believe. and it is a story that reminds us, in its own dark way, that even in the worst circumstances imaginable, the human spirit can endure. I'll thank you for spending this time with me. If you enjoyed this journey into one of the darker corners of the 41st Millennium, I would be grateful if you would hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Every subscription helps this community grow, and there are so many more stories to tell, so many more corners of this vast, dark, magnificent universe to explore together. Leave me a comment and tell me what other scenarios you would like me to explore, what other dark what-ifs keep you up at night when you think about the grim darkness of the far future. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and remember, in the Emperor's name, endure.
I hope you guys enjoyed the story. Make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any. And yeah, sleep well.